Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine getting a letter, from someone you love who's overseas. It's full of just, well, everyday stuff, the weather, trying to find a radio, friends playing cards, and it ends with this promise, this really hopeful line, I'll be back someday.
Mhm.
For so many families during World War II, that wasn't imagination, it was real. A lifeline, really. Today we're doing a deep dive into the story of one of those individuals, Staff Sergeant Richard Clarence Bindel. We've got a pretty good stack of sources here, local newspaper clippings, mostly from the Sabetha Herald, covering, wow, 1943 right up to 2007. And we also have military records from Find a Grave in NARA, that's the National Archives.
Yeah, and what's great about having these different kinds of sources is how they let us piece together a very personal story. You can really trace his journey, from a kid on a Kansas farm to flying these crucial missions over Europe. And you see the impact, the deep impact of his sacrifice. So our mission today, I think, is to pull out the key insights from all this, give you a really detailed look into Richard's life, but also maybe what it tells us about that time.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Richard Clarence Bindel, born February 24th, 1922. The sources say he grew up on a farm south of Sabetha, Kansas. Helped out with farming mostly, went to St. Augustine grade school there in Fidelity, and then a couple years of high school at Powhatan and Fairview. It paints a picture, doesn't it? A typical young guy from a small rural community.
Absolutely. And his story, well, it starts like so many others from that generation. He registered for the draft, Nemaha County, 1942, a standard thing then during the war. But it wasn't long after that his life took a very different path, a long way from Kansas farming.
And here's where it gets really interesting. He joined the Army Air Force in November 42. And his training, wow, it took him all over the country. Florida, Texas, California, Utah, New Mexico, Nebraska, Indiana. I mean, can you even imagine that shift
Yeah.
from rural Kansas to all these different bases and states?
It's quite something to think about, the sheer scale of that mobilization, moving millions of people around. And the sources, they highlight his specific training, too. He graduated from Aerial Gunnery School, Harlingen, Texas, and then got advanced training on those big B-24D bombers, the Liberators, out in San Diego, California, at the Consolidated Vultee plant.
Right. And we even have a quote from him, May 1943, writing from San Diego. He says, "The weather is beautiful. This is the first time I've been in California, and I like it swell. I am getting advanced training on the big B-24D bombers, widely known as Liberators." And then this. "The meals are the best I've eaten in a long time, and it doesn't seem like I'm in the Army." That last bit, it doesn't seem like I'm in the Army. It shows him adapting, maybe even finding some good moments.
I think so. It's a fascinating glimpse, isn't it, into how people coped. He's in this incredibly serious, high-stakes training environment, but he's noticing the good weather, the better food. It suggests he's, finding ways to make it bearable, maybe even enjoyable in moments, anchors to normalcy. It shows resilience, I think, adapting to this totally new world.
So, after all that training, his journey takes him overseas. He got home for a bit, on furlough, November 1943. Must have been precious time with family. Then shipped out from New York in December 43. Stationed in England, serving as an aerial engineer and top turret gunner on a B-24 Liberator.
Yeah, and that dual role is significant. The B-24, the Liberator, was a real workhorse bomber in Europe, absolutely critical. So as an engineer, he's keeping this complex machine running, vital. And as top turret gunner, he's right there in the thick of defending it from fighters. Requires technical skill and, well, incredible courage.
And we get this incredibly personal look into his time there from a letter he sent home to his parents, Mr. and Mrs. A.J. Bindel. It's dated April 5, 1944. And that date? Turns out to be really significant. Tragically so. He writes, "I received 2 letters from you today, and was I ever glad to hear from home." It's typical March weather here today, and I'm wondering if it is that way at home. It just sounds so normal.
It really does. It brings the whole massive conflict down to a very human level. He's in England, part of this huge war machine, but he's thinking about Kansas weather. It just shows how vital those letters were, that connection back home.
He also asks for a friend's address, Melvin Breeden, hopes they can get together, thinks he might be nearby. Mentions his mail is slow, just gets a little form the English girls once in a while. Bit of humor there, maybe. And describes the crew doing their pressing job, washing clothes one day, ironing the next. Even tried to buy a radio in town, but couldn't find one. These little details.
They paint such a vivid picture, don't they, of the day-to-day realities, trying to connect with friends, seeking small comforts like mail or a radio, creating routines like laundry. It raises that question, doesn't it? How did these seemingly mundane things help sustain morale in such extreme circumstances? They were lifelines.
And then the letter ends with that line that just hits hard, knowing what happened. Tell everyone hello from me, and to keep the home fires burning as I'll be back someday.
Hmm.
We also find out he wrote another letter that same day, April 5th, to his cousin, asking for a cigar from her wedding as a souvenir. And in another letter to his parents, written just before he was lost, he sounded really confident. Said the bombers were dealing crushing blows and they'd win the war before Christmas. That optimism.
It's tough to read, knowing the timing. But that optimism, that confidence, it was probably crucial for him, for the crew. Way to manage the fear, to keep focused on the mission, maybe, and to reassure folks back home. But the devastating irony is that April 5th, 1944, the day he wrote all this, that was the day he went missing over France.
Yeah. So what does this all mean? It means the news arrived weeks later. The Sabetha Herald, April 26, 1944. Headline: SSG Richard C. Bindel is missing in action. The telegram from the War Department arrived at his parents' home on Saturday, April 22nd. No details, just missing.
And that waiting period, the missing in action status, was just agonizing for families. The newspaper article really captures the community's feeling. With the vastly increased aerial warfare, it is inevitable that some must be among the missing. But each time one is reported, it comes with the same shock. It shows how personal these losses were, even amidst huge casualty numbers. Each one was a shock.
There was even this sort of flicker of hope mentioned in that same article. Another Sabetha man, Lieutenant Robert Fulton, a navigator, had written home saying he often saw 10 parachutes when a bomber went down, suggesting, good chance of survival. But for Richard's family, that hope, it didn't last.
No. It highlights that emotional roller coaster, clinging to any positive sign. But the official confirmation came later, August 5th, 1944. Another telegram. This one relayed through the International Red Cross from the German government, stating that SSGT Richard C. Bindel, previously missing, was now confirmed killed in action on April 5 over France. The date matching the day of those last letters. Just heartbreaking confirmation.
Sources add more detail. He was the flight engineer on B-Chump 4D number 4272870. The missing aircrew report, the MACR number, was 3568. We also learned he was the last of his crew to be reported killed. Some actually made it back to England safely. But most of the others had already been confirmed KIA sometime before Richard was.
Right. And that MACR, the missing aircrew report, it really points to the sheer scale and, frankly, the bureaucracy of loss in that air war. Each report triggered this massive investigation. And for the families, that number became the symbol of their uncertainty and grief. The fact that the crew's fate wasn't known all at once, that Richard was the last confirmed, it shows how chaotic those events were and how it prolonged the agony for families like the Bindels.
And Richard's death, it wasn't an isolated tragedy for his community, not at all. That 2007 Sabetha Herald article puts it in context. He was the fourth WWII casualty from just St. Augustine Parish in Fidelity in about 9 months. It lists the others: SSG Leroy Blocker, MIA, then POW, TSG Teattle Key, MIA, SSG Lawrence Winterchute, KIA just a few months before Richard. 4 names out of 20 on the parish honor roll. That really brings home the cost to these small towns.
It absolutely does. That detail is so important. It broadens the focus from one family's loss to the collective grief of a community. In places like Fidelity or Sabetha, everyone knew everyone. These weren't just names on a list. They were neighbors, friends, relatives. The honor roll, the masses said. These were ways the community tried to process it, to share the burden of that sacrifice. It shows how deeply the war reached into every corner of American life.
Yeah, the paper mentions the Fidelity community was deeply saddened. Father Moriarty offered the 11 o'clock Mass for Richard and all the service boys from the parish. They held memorial services at St. Augustine Church, too, attended by family, friends, his parents, 2 sisters, 6 brothers, a large family feeling that loss.
Indeed. And those services, the prayers, they highlight the role of faith and community support in getting through such times. It was how people came together, mourned together, and honored the sacrifice. And remembering his mother, Ruth Bindel, lived to be 101, passing in 2007, it underscores the long, long shadow these losses cast, decades later.
So Richard Clarence Bindel, his journey took him from Kansas farm fields through training all across America to the skies over Europe in a B-24, an aerial engineer, a gunner. His letters, full of everyday life and that persistent hope. They're just incredibly powerful, a real testament to the human spirit.
And his story has a final chapter, in a way. His remains were eventually brought back from Marigny-Saint-Lô in France, reinterred August 30th, 1949, back home in Kansas at the National Cemetery and Countryside. That repatriation, bringing the fallen home, was so important for closure for countless families after the war. So his story, pieced together from these local papers and records, it really reminds us of the individual cost behind the grand narrative of WWWII and the lasting impact, right up to his mother living past 100. That's generations affected.
It really is. So when you think about Richard's story, that journey, those last letters, what's the takeaway? As you reflect on his life and that promise he made, I'll be back someday, maybe consider this. How do these personal stories like Richard's really deepen your understanding of what conflict costs? And what does it mean, really, across all that time to keep the home fires burning? Something to think about.